So if you're returning to sea angling after a break, or if you're new to the sport, here are 10 quick beginner fundamentals to get it right. So we're going to run through what to do in order to catch your first fish from the UK's coastline. I'll be on the beach myself to see if I can put all of these into action and hopefully show you that you can catch a fish year round as we head out in February. Of course, a lot depends where you live in the UK. We do have such a varied coastline here, and we're going to be visiting a local tackle shop to see what you really need to start off sea fishing. When I come down to the beach, bring this sort of quiver type of bag. You can carry the rods however you like, but I just like being able to see what's actually in the bag. So when you grab it at home or whatever from the shed, then you know that you've got your 3 sections here, 3 sections there, tripods there. Where you've got bags that cover everything up, it's just another step. I think it sort of stops you forgetting stuff. See, that's got either a handle or put that over your back. And you can put a few little oddments in here as well. So the other thing I use for general beach fishing is a beach box like this. So you'll see these beach boxes a lot, the match anglers like, and these themselves come with little attachments as well. You can have trays on the side for things like putting your bait on and what have you. So this is how I turn up on the beach, ready to get. Really changeable weather today. We've had the sun in and out, the wind's off the land, sort of slightly northeasterly. And that first push of the tide, usually quite a good time to fish, so let's give it a go. One of the joys of fishing are all the UK sea fish you might be able to catch, and I think one of your first steps should really be to buy an identification book, and then you're committing to memory a lot of the pictures of the fish, so that when you do catch something, you know whether it's a bass or whether it's a flounder, or is it a smooth hound, and the difference between UK flatfish as well. Is something to be aware of, because once you get that fish, you need to know, are you allowed to keep it? They've all got minimum size limits. Get yourself a match measure as well, so you know if you're allowed to retain the fish or if it's undersized. We're looking at here are lead weights. You can see some of these lead weights have grips on them. I'll show you how those work in a minute. But there's a big selection here with 5 and 6 ounce leads, 4 ounce leads. They're the blue ones there, actually a fraction over 4 ounce. 5 ounce, 6 ounce leads there as well. Another important thing to remember with these leads is you're gripping into the seabed with them, whether that's over sand or shingle. And if you're rock fishing, you can actually straighten out those leads to stop them going through the gaps in the rocks. So it's not only for just those shingle and sand anglers. So this is a 170 gram, which is a 6 ounce lead. You don't normally cast much more than this. Perhaps some of those Bristol Channel anglers would disagree. So we've looked at this a lot in the channel. These grips come off. You can make them nice and tight by squeezing them that way. The idea being that the fish normally hooks itself in a good tide because that is gripped to the seabed, and you don't need to strike in sea fishing in a similar way. The thing to go down then is the rod rest. This way you've got something to rest the rod on while you're setting them up. Now I like this Ian Gold Super Match rod rest. It's a particular make, and I prefer the V-tubing on here. It's got the cups on here. Fishing on what we call a flooding tide. Now I know this venue well, and those waves out there, they can show you that it's shallow water. The wind's coming from the east, which is this way, with a tripod here, and the sea there coming in. We want to be a little bit further back where we set up our little camp. 3-piece rod, and I prefer these continental styles now. Again, we're going to look at the rods a little bit later, but for now it's got 3 pieces, and always worth either with a cloth or just check that there's not sand on that male section there. So obviously male into female. A good fitting rod will go together really nicely. We will take a look at some rods. So there really is an array of rods that you'll find when you go into a tackle shop, but if you want to fish in the sea in normal UK sea fishing conditions, you're always asking about a beach rod or a surf rod, they're sometimes called, and these are bigger to cope with the conditions that we find Where you fish bigger, stronger, stiffer rods, for places like the Bristol Channel, you need a stronger rod. So we're just going to have a little look at these. These Any Fish Anywhere rods are excellent. Perhaps a little bit out of the budget at £230. He's 13'6". A little bit out of the budget range of the beginner. You are paying, you're paying mainly for the materials in the blank, the amount of carbon in there and how that's woven. It just feels right. You know, if I was casting with that, I would go, wow, this just feels really good. You really do get good value for money for this Any Fish Anywhere rod. You are paying a little bit more, but you can pay, you know, even more than that. Some of these Centuries, there's one here, the Tip Tornado, expensive, £525. And take a look at this. Look, they do one over at Veals for $14.99. So it does show you can get something really, really cheap. Even $43.99 here, this Axia one. I know that money is tight for a lot of us at the moment, but in terms of getting a better rod for your money, some of these ones here where you're spending just a little bit over £100, you will see a big jump in gains. The quality of the rod material, the quality of the fittings, it will last you a lot longer and be a lot more enjoyable to use. This Yuki one here being a good example. And back to the beach where the tide's really starting to push now into about our second cast into that flooding tide. This the start of the low tide seems to be a little bit more productive for the flatfish, and you can see out there the water pushing over that sandbank. You look at those rods, they are sort of bumping around a bit, aren't they? I don't know whether that is the start of this flooding tide, so the water starts to push, or whether there is a bit of weight on there. So I think we'll leave it. We've got 2 hooks on each until we see something a bit more definite. You see what I mean though? It's like a could just be the braid, because the waves are coming across us left to right here. Best part of the tide, although I think the lead's got a bit buried there. I should just about be enough that to get it over off that sandbank. It's all gone a bit quiet, and then this rattle came along. You see it? We'll go a bit closer to the waves, see what we got. Got to know the difference between what are those waves moving in from the left to the right and what a fish is. A lot of it's feel. And I'm using braid. I'm going to recommend you use mono line. Should still be able to tell. But the first thing you hit with when you come into a tackle shop normally are the shiny things, and you can see here these are what we call multiplier reels, and they're slightly different to these ones here which are called fixed spool reels. So fixed spool and multiplier, and you'll see both of those on the beaches of the UK. There's pros and cons for both. Multiplier sits closer to the rod. It's got sort of better winching power really. Everything's a lot tighter, feels a bit better. In terms of casting distance, you will get a good casting distance, say from something like this Pen 515. This is the Mag 4. It's got magnetic brakes. You have to make sure your casting's up to scratch to get the best out of those reels. And what I recommend for the beginner is a fixed spool reel. So just briefly then, as I say, try and get down to your local tackle shop, and if it is by the coast, they do tend to have more sea fishing based gear. These are fixed spool reels here. You'll see numbers like 8, 9, 10,000, which means they're the bigger sized reels. And in terms of cost, I mean, you can pick something up for sort of 30 quid. I tend to find 70, 80, 90 is good. If you can really push the boat out, how about one of these Shimano air lexes as well. I would stick to nylon fishing line if you are returning to the sport before you start getting something like braid, because it's a lot more forgiving, makes the casting a little less snappy. Actually, follow me over here. This is a good example of a second-hand reel. So why not buy a good condition second-hand reel like this Fixed Spool one here? Have a quick look at casting now. We've shown this on the channel before. This is my friend and casting instructor, Brian Pask.
As we said in previous blogs, with a shock leader on the front end. So it's gripping the reel, releasing the bail arm, and the arm position is pretty much parallel, but with your arms behind and away from your body. The release point when you're coming up and over will be as the rod passes your right ear. So here we go then, guys, and away it goes. So here we go, guys, and away it goes. So in it's coming, and it's going to be laying down inside the arc of the rod. The rod tip laid right down low, the butt up high. The reason for that is you're moving the rod tip the furthest possible distance it can go, and you're also going to be able to pull down with your left hand to apply additional pressure. The lead's inside the tip of the rod, because you're going to bend the rod from the second it starts moving, and that way you're going to get more bend into the rod, which is going to power the lead further away.
So this is my sort of adapted half pendulum cast I use for fishing, and it's just aimed to get a nice smooth arc, compress that rod enough to punch the rod out. Now this isn't a perfect cast by any means, but it is very useful for fishing where you can keep the lead off the ground, particularly if you're fishing rocky marks or banks behind you. Although this is using a multiply reel, you're still releasing that line when it comes past your ear, as Brian was saying. Sometimes can help to get a bit of distance on the rod by keeping those hook snoods, they're the bits that come off the main body of the line. They've got the lugworm on them. It just helps clipping those on, and we're using cascade swivels here to do that. And the last one comes with the clip that comes with those breakaway leads we looked at.
Go to your local tackle shop where you are, and you will find rigs that are suitable to the sort of ground that you're going to be fishing over. Here we've got a selection of 2 hook rigs, 3 hook rigs. You'll see the words like flapper and wishbone rigs, and these are really designed for fishing here in Sussex. But it depends where you are in the country. If you're fishing over the rocky, snaggy ground of Cornwall, places like the Bristol Channel, things like the pulley pennel rigs, which we do have a few of here, pennel rigs and clip down rigs might be more suitable to your area. So it really is a case for horses for courses. Find out where you're going to be fishing, and your local tackle shop should have the rigs for you. You can of course make up your own rigs as well. This is where the quality of the terminal tackle comes into it. I would actually avoid these crane snap swivels unless you're fishing from a boat, because casting with those can be a problem. But something like these super strength genie clips here, those genie clips there are going to be a lot more reliable. I'm never without bait elastic, really helpful for tying in almost every sort of bait. Beads here as well, work as attractors for a number of fish, mainly places. So this is at Hastings Angling Centre in the east of Hastings, and it's well stocked obviously for sea fishing. If you're nearer the coast, you'll obviously find sea fishing gear that's suited for the coast. And that is something to pay attention to. If you're inland, you'll find a lot of freshwater gear, and they'll have a smaller selection of sea fishing. Having a quick look at hooks as well, you'll see these numbers here with a 0 after it, and these are the hook sizes. I use a Tronic Pro leader. It's cheap, it's a tapered leader, so it's thin where it meets the main line, and it gets thicker and thicker so you can cast those weights we looked at earlier. You can use braid on the line rather than this monofilament line. However, if you're a beginner, I wouldn't suggest using braid to start off with for your beach fishing. It can be a bit more unforgiving in the cast, and I think you're better off learning with the mono first, because you probably will get into a few tangles, and that braid's a little bit more expensive. Feels a little bit heavier.
something on here. Well, the good and the bad. Good, the bad and the ugly. That's a dab. Nice one again. This is a rockling. Usually a bad sign, but that's the good one. That's the bad one. I'm going to keep I'll keep this dab. I'm going to take these off actually. Give that a little bit of a run in the tide. The flounder do prefer that, I think, a bit of movement. Fridge in a tackle shop. So let's have a look what we've got inside the fridge here. Now this is live lugworm. We're going to show you the wrapped in a minute, but you can see this is live. It's kept in the salt water, and in this case divided up into 20, so you're more than likely to see 10 or 20 lugworm. They keep it in these big pans. Look at that. Sped up film. So you can take it like that, and it's going to be a little bit easier. The juices will burst on these, but it's a lot easier getting the gutted lugworm. This is the stuff that you might find wrapped. So you can use either or. It's probably slightly easier to be putting the wrapped lug onto the hook. There are plenty of other baits you'll see for sea fishing other than lugworm. Frozen squid's quite popular. You can tip baits with little bits of squid. You can use whole sand eels and even float fish them over rock marks. These are mackerel as well, which you can use whole. You can use heads of mackerel. And you've got blueies, very pungent smelling non-UK fish that you can use for things like thornback rays. So you've got a leader line coming off your main line, and that ends up with a very thick piece of line, usually around 60-70 pounds. The thick line will take a few nicks and what have you from the seabed, but also you can put some power into those weights as well when you compress the rod. It doesn't just snap off. And on the end of that, I tend to use one of these clip swivels here. These are rated to be able to take those more powerful casts. A flounder. Look at that. It does have orange spots, but that's still a flounder. Oh, there you go. What they don't realise out on that little sandbank is the water behind them is in a deep trench. You can of course fish with lures from the sea, which we haven't covered in this video, but if you click on the video on the top right hand corner there, I can tell you all about this exciting way of catching bass from the UK's coastline.